Jiri Prochazka will overwhelm Jamahal Hill.
Say hello again to Jiri Prochazka.
I like to fight more. I like art to show something special.
This guy is a huge injection of talent into this light heavyweight division.
Other side from myself wants to live just in the forest, in the small house, and practice.
Jamahal Sweet Dreams Hill. Perhaps his biggest attribute has always been his confidence. But sleep-inducing strikes are not too far behind for Sweet Dreams.
Jamahal Hill is ridiculous.
I like to look at myself as an entertainer. I think my style of fighting is entertaining. I'm truly a menace for whoever I step across.
Now there's nowhere to hide. The real king is back and there will be blood.
Jiri vs Jamahal are set to face off at UFC 311, and this fight is poised to be an absolute banger, as both of these guys, and Jiri and Jamahal, both have a lot of finishes on the record, and it seems like essentially every one of their fights ends in a finish one way or the other. But quickly, before we get the video started, for those of you who may not know, I'm JuicyMMA. I make opinionative MMA content, and if you guys enjoy videos similar to this, hit that subscribe button, that like button, and that post notification bell. But anyways, let's get into it. Ever since making it to the UFC, it was pretty clear that there was something truly special with Jiri Prochazka. As early on, this guy was literally finishing everybody. As in his first fight, he ended up finishing Volkan Oezdemir with a second round TKO. In his second fight, he ended up finishing Dominic Reyes with also a second round TKO, and that was an absolute highlight finish as well. And after only 2 wins, he got a title shot against Glover Teixeira. Now, I know a lot of UFC fans, including myself, like to see guys get a few more wins under their belt before they get a title shot, but at the end of the day, the fact that Jiri was given a title shot after only 2 fights really speaks volumes to how the UFC perceived this guy, as obviously he was getting a lot of finishes over the guys they put in front of him, but he's also doing so in very creative and very spectacular fashion as well. And in that title shot against Glover Teixeira, Jiri absolutely delivered, as it turned out to be a banger fight, one of the greatest fights I've ever seen, as it was a back and forth affair. Glover Teixeira had his moments early, he even hurt Jiri Prochazka pretty badly later on in that fight, while Jiri also had his moments as he was landing nicely on the feet at times. He was showing some skill on the ground as well, and at the very end of the 5th round, Jiri was able to find a submission on Glover Teixeira, which within itself is an extremely impressive accomplishment, considering that Jiri Prochazka wasn't necessarily known for his grappling coming into the UFC, and especially going into that fight, but also when you consider Glover Teixeira's best ability is his jiu-jitsu. So the fact that Jiri was able to submit this guy is really impressive. But when you also consider that he was able to submit Glover after being hurt pretty significantly a round earlier, and after going through an absolute war at the very end of the 5th round, it was pretty clear at that point that Jiri Prochazka was legit, and a lot of people thought that Jiri would be a champ for a very long time. But a question that some of you may be wondering at this point is, why was Jiri able to be so successful so early on into his UFC career? Well, in my opinion, it comes down to a few factors, but obviously the first factor is his overall skill. Because when you watch Jiri out there, it's pretty clear that this guy has a very unique style, and a style that would only work for him. Because this guy does 2 things on the feet that most gyms would teach you not to do, as he keeps his hands extremely low, and obviously if you have your hands extremely low, you're more susceptible to getting hit, and that has been something we've seen throughout Jiri's career. He does get hit a decent amount, but Jiri has been able to get away with it for the most part because he has a granite chin, but he also puts a lot of weight on his front foot, and the negative to that would be you would be susceptible to leg kicks. And in some of Jiri's more recent fights, we have seen that become a negative, as in his fight against Alex Pereira, both of his fights against Alex Pereira actually, and also his fight against Alexander Rakic. The leg kicks were affecting Jiri pretty significantly, but for the most part, Jiri is able to get away with that style. As on the feet, Jiri does a really nice job at just being unique out there. He throws wild shots out there to confuse his opponents until eventually he's able to land one big shot to knock out his opponent. defense. As when you look at his fights, that's exactly what he was able to do against essentially everybody. Against Ozdemir, he was able to find a TKO in the second round. Against Dominic Reyes, he was able to find that beautiful elbow, but I think the perfect example of how Jiri fights out there and why he's been able to be so successful is his fight against Rakic. Because in that Rakic fight, in the first round, Rakic was honestly dominating. He was landing leg kicks at will, he was really hurting Jiri and limiting his movement. He was also landing pretty effectively to the head as well, as he was throwing nice jabs, nice right straights, and for the most part, he fought a perfect first round. But going into that second round, all of that didn't matter, as although Jiri was getting dominated, he was still able to land a big shot on Rakic, and from that point going forward, the fight was essentially over. And that fight completely describes why Jiri has been so successful because of two things. First, it does show his skill, because if you're gonna land a big shot on a guy like Rakic or any of the other guys that he knocked out in the past, obviously you have to be skillful on the feet, and Jiri definitely is. But it also showed exactly why Jiri is so successful, is because it showed his durability and his physicality. Because as I said, he was getting hit a ton, but for the most part, it really didn't affect him whatsoever. But eventually, when that opening was there, he was able to land, and it really only took one shot to completely change that fight and get a finish victory for Jiri Prochazka. Now, obviously, although Jiri has been very successful with this style, it also has hindered him in his two fights against Alex Pereira. Because Pereira is very skilled on the feet, but he's also able to match Jiri's physicality, as Pereira is the hardest hitter in the light heavyweight division. And in those two fights, Alex was able to land pretty effectively on the feet until he eventually found his signature left hook in the first fight, or when he found that head kick in the second fight. And those two fights against Pereira kind of showed the weakness in Jiri's game. To beat Jiri Prochazka, it seems like you have to be very technical on the feet and hit extremely hard, while also utilizing leg kicks, which is exactly what Pereira does well out there. But regardless of those Pereira fights, it's pretty clear for the most part Jiri is able to have a lot of success against virtually everybody else. But now, a question that some of you may be wondering at this point is, why do I think Jiri Prochazka is going to overwhelm Jamahal Hill? Well, I feel this way for a couple different reasons, but the first reason I want to touch upon is Jiri's overall style. Because Jiri just has a lot of different things that he throws out at you. On the feet, he does a really nice job at throwing out a lot of different shots to confuse his opponents. He does a really nice job at pressuring his opponents for the most part. And in this fight against Jamahal Hill, I also think takedowns are going to be a potential key to Jiri's victory. As although in Jamal's fight against Glover Teixeira, he was able to stop basically all of the takedowns, at that point in Glover's career, he was a lot older, not nearly as explosive as a guy like Jiri Prochazka, but also the fact that Jiri has a lot to offer on the feet is going to open up the ability for Jiri to find those takedowns. And if he's able to find those takedowns, it's going to open up even more on the feet for Jiri. So I think the fact that this guy is so well-rounded and has the ability to win in a lot of different ways is going to prove to be a real problem for Jamahal Hill. Now, some of you in the comments may be wondering why I think Jiri is going to win, because on paper, it does seem like it's a perfect fight for Jamahal Hill. Jamal does do a really nice job historically of fighting off the back foot. He also does a nice job at finding his shots, staying technical in there, and landing that big left hand to knock out guys. And as I mentioned before, in those two fights where Jiri lost to Alex Pereira, the reason why he lost was because Alex hit so hard and he's also pretty technical on the feet. And while all those things are true, it could potentially be a tough fight for Jiri on paper. I think the fact that Jamal is coming off two pretty significant leg injuries is going to play a factor, and it's going to be more difficult for him to get out of the way from a lot of the shots that Jiri throws. But also recently there was a report that came out from Jamahal Hill himself actually saying that just a few weeks before his scheduled bout at 205 pounds, he weighed around 230 plus pounds. So that's potentially setting up for a very difficult weight cut against Jiri. And if Jamal does have a pretty tough weight cut, that's going to lead to a lot of negatives. Of course, his durability is going to be a question mark, but also his cardio is going to be a question mark as well. Because if in the latter half of that fight, in the second or third round, Jamahal Hill is tired out there, it's going to be very difficult for him to make it out of that fight. Because when Jiri has a tired fighter in front of him, for the most part, he's able to find that finish. So I think due to the fact that Jamal is coming off a couple of leg injuries alongside with a potentially tough weight cut, it's going to make it very difficult for Jamal to win this fight against Jiri Prochazka. But anyways, let me know what you guys think in the comments. Do you think Jiri Prochazka is going to beat Jamahal Hill, or do you not think so? But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you did enjoy, check one of these two videos popping up now, and until the next time, peace out guys.